So, Carrie, good evening. Thank you for joining. We'll get started. We've got the full committee. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'll call the meeting to order, 5:34 p.m., May 27th, Wenham FinCom meeting. Thank you for attending, everybody. I have in my other monitors here all the meeting packet materials, and the one I did not bring up, which is a rather important one, is the agenda. But I'm going to guess it has budget update as the first line item. Anyone care to correct me?
It has FY21 and then, the 112 budget first and then FY21.
Right, 112 and 21. Thank you. That's right, Gary. We got more specific last week in our request. Good call. Okay, so I guess, so first off, we'll be covering the materials that were sent over in advance of last week's meeting, but not with a whole lot of time to review. So those have proven to be great materials and show a lot of good work on behalf of the town. Chris, Jackie, thanks very much for all that, all the work that went into that we'll give overviews of and delve into, and Anthony as well. Much appreciated. So does it make sense to start with the kind of the 1/12th is probably the more straightforward component to review. And there are a couple materials. You've got a memo from Chris and Jackie that basically details how the 1/12th works. I did have one or two questions on that. And then a related attachment, July 1/12th, May 14th, 2020 is the title of that, which has the line items of the accounts. So I guess, Chris or Jackie, do you want to just offer any kind of summary level comments as to the 1/12th points made in the memo?
Yes, I can talk to that. So the 1/12th, actually, let me pull up the memo and we can go over that real quick. But yeah, basically, the memo was just going over the process of how it needs to, the whole process of how the Board of Selectmen need to approve it. And then once that, then the clerk needs to certify it, and then we'll upload it with the clerk certification to the DOR's website for the Director of Accounts for approval.
Chris, did you want this?
Sorry. Yes, there we go. Thank you. So that was the process, and so that was the basic process. And then here, this summary memo is how the 1/12th was calculated for the month of July. It's not as straightforward as just taking 1/12th of the fiscal year 20 budget. There are exceptions. Regional school assessments need to be fully funded, debt needs to be funded, and memberships also need to be funded. So all the salaries were calculated based on there's going to be 2 payroll dates in the month of July. So stipends will be on one, and then all the regular salaried employees will have 2 paychecks. So that's how all the salaries were calculated. And then majority, as I was mentioned, majority of the expenses were on the, the 1/12th of the 20, but there were a few exceptions. As you can see here, the Essex Regional Retirement, they offer approximately a 15,000 savings if you pay in full in the month of July in your first warrant. We also have a debt payment coming due on August 1st, which is a Saturday. So to make sure that that gets paid on time, which debt payments need to do, we're going to pay that the last week in July to make sure it's processed by the due date of August 1st. General insurance is another one where the town receives a discount when we pay them in full in the month of July. So those get paid, as well as the library, talking with the library director, Kim Butler, their Merrimack Valley Library Consortium membership it always comes due in full in the month of July, which is approximately $51,000 this year. Then Jackie in her permitting software that also receives a savings if we pay it in full. So that was a new one we found out after the fact that we added in the $4,000 savings to pay that. So we are paying that. And then obviously the school assessment, as I mentioned, that the full approved budget that they approved back in February is what we are budgeting for to pay in the month of July, the 1/12.
Chris,
Yes, Jim.
what was the what was the savings of those three accounts by paying them in full?
The savings for the regional was approximately 15,000, and then with this, so by paying this Acela software and the regional assessment, it will be about 19,000. The library one is just, that's when it's due every year. There's no discount. That's just, it's paid in full in July, year after year. So it will be about, and it's tough to tell with the general insurance because as we've been with the COVID, we've been having some employees do some certifications for the town that increases our discount. So the total amount of that discount we don't really know that right now, but it will be, a pretty, it will be worthwhile to be paying it.
Chris, if I can offer one correction, the Acela is not necessarily a discount. It's due in full in July as well. But when we initially priced out the contract, we received savings by doing the pay up front in July versus choosing the monthly payment option. So it's a similar circumstance where it is due in July. It's just when we did the contract, we had some cost savings by paying all up front.
Thank you, Jackie. I misunderstood you on that. Thank you.
So we saved about 35,000 plus the general insurance, which you're not sure of right now. 35,000 plus the general insurance roughly.
Jim, can I make a note to that? So I would say that this is not necessarily a savings. We always budget as though we're going to pay for these items in July, which is why it's important to budget for them with the 1/12 budget. So we always plan to have Chris do these accounts payables for these items in July, which is why we included them in the 1/12. Otherwise, we'd actually increase what we would need to budget for certain line items that are seen here.
Yeah, so we budget to the discounts, to make a long story short.
It's what?
We budget to the discounts.
Oh, okay, you budget to the discounts. So we aren't achieving any real actual discounts, but we are, but we budgeted that way.
Budgeted,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, got it, okay.
Yeah, when we set up the contract, we knew what we would do, right? When you would pay up front.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't see this particular document, this memo, the summary of the 1/12 with the bulleted items in the email. Not to say it isn't there. I have a 1/12 budget memo, also dated May 14th. That's slightly different. And anyone else?
Yeah, I
sorry.
have the same in front of me. I don't
Sorry
have-
if I included the wrong one. Hold on.
I just sent it to everybody.
Thank you,
It is.
Anthony. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just sent it now again?
Yeah,
Or-
just,
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, just now.
Yeah,
Okay,
just-
thanks.
no.
Yeah, that'll be helpful to have this breakdown, and I want to jump back to that. So the one that you sent was destined for FinCom and BOS anyway, also dated May 14th, where you talk about COLAs, for example. Talk about it's not a long-term solution. The debt payment issues, increased expenditure, costs associated with trash, retirement contributions, healthcare, and our other obligations. And then there's some kind of procedural stuff that I want to get to in a minute. So, but
Okay.
that's helpful to have. So thanks for putting that together and outlining some of the key points. And in the body of that, above the bulleted section, you also indicate the fire truck, the costs associated with that. So basically, we were budgeting for the fire truck for capital, which based on a price set forth by the dealer, which, as you outlined in that, is set to increase after some date, after June 30th.
After June 30th, yes.
Okay. And we have a warrant article associated with that, right? So I think there are implications there that could upset our plans if we had to revert to 1/12 or no. If we don't buy the thing before then, what happens?
Fire truck,
So,
the fire truck is expected to go up in price if we do not place the order by June 30th. So normally what would happen is after town meeting, we basically have the go-ahead. Normally we can't spend the money, obviously, till after July 1st, but they're not asking for it. They just want the commitment. And by having the town meeting vote, we get the commitment. So, but Chief Kavanaugh and Deputy Baxter has indicated that the vendor told them that the price is going to go up after June 30th. And to what dollar amount, we just don't know.
and for the implications to the articles, we do not need to change the ballot question that is going to be, that is already on all of the absentee ballots. So the ballot question will remain the same. It's that we will need to find additional funds to appropriate to whatever the new cost or the updated cost will be. So we'll hopefully be getting the new estimate soon. We'll run that through with our consultants that we utilized for our debt issuances. And then we'll get an updated amount for the first year interest payment and come back to FinCom with hopefully some kind of funding solution for that. But as you know, it's already very tight and limited. So hopefully it stays low, but it could be upwards of 20% increase, which is a challenge.
Right, so tens of thousands.
I think the one good thing is that we were only planning to pay the interest for the first year. So with the ban as the type of borrowing we're using for a fire truck, we can pay just the first year interest only and then have a slightly higher payment in years 2 through 10. So at least we would only be seeing the increase for year 1 for the interest payment. And we can, as long as we legally just pay the interest, that's the minimum due for year 1, and then we can budget the higher amount for fiscal 22. But still definitely in the tens of thousands.
Right.
Currently it's at just under 10,000 for the year 1 interest. So we'll definitely see that increase.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jackie. And I recall, of course, your explanation of why the dollar amount wasn't on the ballot. So that probably speaks to the validity of that continuing. And we could appropriate a different amount, but it's still a dollar cost increase associated with not having the approval by town meeting to make this purchase post June 30. So if that were to not happen.
Correct, and we'll make sure that that's updated when we look at the warrant articles as we go through the different funding scenarios.
Okay. Interesting point also in the memo, or one or both of them, about the 1/12 budget, that the FY21 regional school district adopted budget is the assessment stemming from that to Wenham is what's used, right? So it's not like we revert back to the school's FY20 budget for 1/12 as well.
No, yeah, my understanding is that since school committee approved that, then that's the budget we need to base our monthly assessment off of.
Okay, which obviously is up considerably. So I think that would have a cash flow impact with regard to our to a 1/12 budgeting approach month to month.
Yeah, hopefully July, it won't be too much. It'll really be in that August into September when we'd really start feeling it, I feel, because we'll get the majority of our real estate in the month of July. So it will just be the following months that we'll start feeling a little bit of the cash flow, I feel.
So how is it that maybe I missed something. How is it that we're going with the 1/12 budget based upon the 21 school budget, which hasn't been voted on? How does that, did I understand that correctly? That the 1/12 budget for the schools is predicated on their 21 budget and not their 20 budget?
Yes, because of the increases in the assessment that with all the bulletins that have been coming out, they're saying that assessments in schools should be funded. From my understanding, it's because they originally approved their budget back in February. So that was the budget going forward. So we
I
need
see, but we haven't voted on it though.
Jim, I think procedurally, the Board of Select votes on a 1/12 budget, and then it goes to Department of Revenue and gets approved. And so that's procedurally what happens that gets it approved at the FY21 level. Whatever we put in the 1/12 budget needs to go through those two steps.
And Jim, on the 1/12 budget, you're still responsible for collective bargaining agreements. So if unions are due a cost of living adjustment, they have to be included in the 1/12 budget.
Okay, thank you.
So to Carrie's point about procedurally, the approval by, so the memo from the May 14th ends with, once approved by the Board of Selectmen, the 1/12 budget will be promptly submitted to DOR. Now, just taking a step back, I view the 1/12 exercise, for lack of a better term, I know it's a fair bit of work involved in assembling it all, as one which maybe could be one in futility, meaning we don't need it. It falls by the wayside. We don't revert to it. We have approved by a town meeting governing body FY21 budget, which would be the normal course of. But this is sort of a fallback and pursued as a just-in-case measure. And so where does that stand? Has that been submitted to DOR or I suppose, has it been approved by the Select Board and or submitted to DOR?
It's going to go before the Select Board on Tuesday.
Okay. It will, you're saying this upcoming Tuesday?
Yes, this upcoming Tuesday. We do need them to approve it then because we do need to submit it. We don't want to get caught and not have a budget in place on July 1st. That would not be good. So we need to approve that on Tuesday and at the very least.
There have been two meetings since, 19th and 26th, right?
Yes. No, we
There
didn't need.
wasn't a meeting yesterday.
No.
Oh,
no.
you're right.
Right.
Okay.
So they saw that what you saw last week on the first 1/12. I think Chris's bulleted memo clears up some questions the selectmen had. Hopefully that's enough to make them vote on the 1/12.
Okay.
May just back up a second or just continue this a little bit. One, I apologize for the noise in my house. It's annoying to me.
Can't hear it. No worries.
Oh, good. Two, where are we in the, I guess I should say, where is the Board of Select in thinking on moving forward with June 20th or some other date for an ATM?
ATM is on the agenda for Tuesday night. So I guess we'll find out more on Tuesday.
Do we have a sense of how the survey and how the town is thinking from the survey on the website?
We got preliminary last week. It was at that point, I think we only had about 30 to 40, Jackie, about responses, somewhere around there. But anyways, it showed that at that time that they prefer it outside versus inside. But since that time, we've had a number of people take it, and we'll see the results. It closes today, so our consultants will gift wrap that up and have it over to me for tomorrow, and it'll be in the selectmen's packet for Friday that they'll receive for Tuesday's meeting.
And is there any, I know we're kind of dual tracking or triple tracking, is there any thinking about also submitting a change in quorum to DOR, or I don't know where that goes, the legislature somewhere?
The Senate had a bill. It was actually engrossed by the House yesterday with changes. So my understanding at that point, I think it would have to go back to the Senate to be okayed, and then it would go to the governor's office.
So we're waiting on that process rather than thinking we would go ask for an exception to quorum on our own like Marblehead did?
That's on the agenda for Tuesday night too. So we can see where the bill is by then. If not, we can always go into court and do a Marblehead did.
And I'm not saying we should, I'm just curious. I don't have a one way or another opinion at this point. I was just curious how much dual or triple tracking we're doing.
We're tracking.
I have a question, Anthony and Chris, on the FY21 budget.
21,
Yeah,
well, you
yeah, 112.
on the 112th? Yeah, Mike.
So you're planning worst case scenario for the school budget, i.e. you're saying this is what the committee voted on for a budget, and you're also assuming that the cuts that the state is planning to do has not or will not occur. And if any of those two change, then you can adjust accordingly, but you're doing worst case planning.
So our assessment's not going to change. So their school department's looking at what they're losing in state aid to make those cuts. So, so I'm not sure how we're going to be. We're really not going to have any difference in the number for.
Okay.
Right. My understanding is that the school committee is working through, have had a public forum and are working through expenditure reductions that would make up for the expected reduction in state aid. That is their one source of revenue, the difference between the two being our assessment. So it's, I think our only course of action right now is to proceed with the expectation that our assessment is held constant without direct information from the administration and from the school committee that would say otherwise, that it's either increasing or decreasing. So that said, we've always had an FY21 budget prepared and ready to go that we approved of, that we voted on with respect to the financial warrant articles action to town meeting. We regrouped a month and a half ago following the, after several weeks of this stay-at-home measure in order to assess the impact of the current, COVID action impact rather on FY20 and also any expected changes for FY21, which Chris, Jackie have done a great job in tracking changes to revenue that might be felt immediately, changes to expenditures. I think in a moment we should transition to the FY21 updates that were provided in the email in the packet and details there, which show that through the result of these efforts is an expectation that we should have that our revised FY21 budget will have reductions in expenditures. So our town-based override will be likely reduced, I'll say. We'll continue, of course, unless the select board says otherwise, opens the warrant and changes the articles, we'll continue to have a school override as well. And as to the dollar amount associated with that, I think we should proceed with the expectation that it'll remain constant. Now, if the school committee and administration comes back and says that it's lower, we'll adjust accordingly with town meeting by requesting that the town meeting appropriate less, should we have a town meeting. And if it increases, we'll handle that as well in the same fashion. But otherwise, we're holding constant, I think, unless anyone feels otherwise, we're holding constant our regional school assessment for Wenham for 21.
Alex, just a general question. When do we anticipate the school committee, driving down to their final numbers?
I think they've got, from what I understand, they've got a handle on what their numbers need to be, and it's not a matter of coming forth with changes to the numbers, but changes to the services and the associated costs. So to bring costs down, obviously there's an impact to the program, basically. And that's what, those tough decisions are what they're grappling with now.
Over the next week or so, they may,
I think it's
I
2
believe
weeks.
so, yeah.
a week from
Couple
Wednesday, they're gonna vote? Or they're expected to vote, what's that, June 3rd, 4th, around there?
June 3rd is Wednesday.
Yeah, so I think June 3rd, they're
Okay.
vote their cuts.
Right. And so while we've always been receptive to any, or anticipating the potential for some changes to school budget assessments to Hamilton and Wenham based on their reworking their budget, they had to, address a pretty serious shortfall in revenue. It doesn't put our budget on hold, right? We paused to look at the town side, but clearly there's nothing we can, we don't have jurisdiction over the school's budget. The decisions they make with regard to the expenditures, or obviously at the state level, the revenue they get. We're just on the receiving end of the assessment. So pausing to look at the town side, I think is nearing completion, and we can incorporate any changes that are appropriate to do so for FY21 and proceed with the FY21 budget as kind of FinCom stamp of approval, pending town meeting to have the governing body do the same. Or if that doesn't happen, then of course we revert back to the earlier discussion on 1/12. So we'll hold constant that school amount for now. And it sounds like they're making a concerted effort to rein in costs. It's a huge gap to have to pass along to the towns. I think there's a recognition that we're not in a position where we can absorb it. We just don't have the capacity. And so perhaps we even see a reduction in the assessment, but who knows?
Are they still working with the $1.3 million loss figure?
Yes.
It's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we go to the FY21? So associated memo there. Memo was sent out also, I think. I'm sorry, I'm just looking to juggle back to Chris, your email from last Wednesday. I think that was dated. Let's see here.
There's actually a newer one that was sent out that we were working on.
Where's the new one? Jackie, did you send another one?
Guys, I didn't send a new memo. We talked about that we're having a new memo for the BOS, but not for tonight. I was
Oh.
gonna work off of my old memo.
All right, you're right.
Sorry.
That's right.
I'm living in life a week ago. We're
Yeah.
still on that memo.
Chris,
No.
you may have sent it. You
But
may have
we
sent it. We've
have
got,
a file, I think I just pulled it up from an email that came out like 3:40 or 3:50 today.
that's a roll up, not a memo.
So
So the-
what, Alex, what document are you going to?
Going to, from Chris.
Jackie, where can I find it so I can pull it up on the computer?
It's in the budgets drive.
Yeah.
And it's called FY21 budget memo, and it's dated May 14th.
Budgets. Budget drive.
Carrie and others on FinCom from Chris, Wednesday, just before 5. Several attachments.
So today or
Nope.
last Wednesday?
Last Wednesday,
May 20th?
May 20th.
What folder,
The
Jackie?
memo, yes, the memo was last Wednesday, and there was an updated budget summary that I sent out today.
Roll up today, right? Okay. Why don't we start with the memo? So give everyone a second here to get on the same page.
Jackie, where is it? What folder? Within,
It's under FY21 budget, and I just renamed it. Anthony, click on this one.
yeah, but what folder?
FY21 budget.
Just in that one? Okay. So
Yeah. And I renamed it Anthony, click this one.
This Zoom stuff is awesome.
Can you make it like flash green or something?
I wish I had that kind of power. That'd be really cool.
Is it, I'm not seeing it, Jackie, in the budget 21 folder itself.
I
If you
can
look
share
at,
if you
like,
want.
In order of date
Yeah.
modified.
I did. It's not in the folder. It's not in the FY21.
Okay.
Anthony, I'm sending it to you right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have it.
Is it in the subfolder, Jackie, or is it in the main?
No, it's in the main folder.
All right, I'll wait for Carrie.
I emailed it, but there's no subject title, and it's from my Gmail account.
Let's go right to proof point.
Communication breakdown.
Well,
Is what I
it's just
get.
Zoom meetings, right? I mean, everything would be nicely printed and would all be
We killed several
staring
trees by
at,
now.
staring at, yeah, staring at the. Jackie would be saying, "This one, Alex," and standing up and handing me the piece of paper right in front of me.
I sure missed that.
Yeah.
Join the club, Jim. So
Yeah.
this is to BOS and FinCom, also dated May 14th, FY21 budget, and it's got a paragraph on revenues, one on expenses, lots of breakdown, looks to be 3 pages.
I got it. I got it.
Cool.
I printed that out.
I'll have it in a second.
Okay, Carrie, you got it. Mike, David,
I
you
don't.
got, you
Can you
guys
just let
got
me
it?
know who it's from? I don't have it from Jackie.
It's from me. It's from
Olaf.
me.
Who's the original sender?
I think it was from me last Wednesday.
Oh,
Chris and Jackie, I have.
Oh,
Yeah, it's from Chris.
I have it from Chris Holak on May 20th.
I'm re-forwarding it to you now, David.
I'm
Anyone else
having
want it?
issues. All right, sorry, I'm looking under Jackie.
No, no problem. You've got it. I just sent it. And then, Mike, you good?
Negative.
Coming along to your email.
Got it. Oh, you're just sending it?
Yep, I'm doing that
Oh,
right now.
okay.
All
There it
right, thank
is.
you. There it is.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And then if the authors of the, while I try and forward this to Mike Darian, the memo authors want to start off, don't wait for me with the
Okay.
overview, please.
I will get started on the revenue section. First, so folks may remember from when Rep. Hill and Senator Tarr came to the roundtable, they encouraged us to forecast at least a 20% reduction in state aid. So to be very cautious, we looked at a 25% reduction in state aid. And you can see on the memo that's from roughly 465,000 to 348,000. So we're losing about 116,000 in state aid in our updated revenue projections from pre-COVID to post-COVID. We're also projecting a $75,000 reduction in our motor vehicle excise tax, which is under local receipts. So that's down from our original FY21 projection. We're also looking at smaller revenue decreases for Pleasant Pond from Hamilton, for certain fees, reimbursements from Gordon College for emergency response, our investment income, and fines and forfeits. So overall, we're looking at a $206,298 decrease in local receipts. We're also projecting a smaller amount of free cash being plugged in to balance the budget. As Anthony had talked about a little bit earlier in this meeting, and for folks that watched last week's BOS meeting, I apologize for repeating it. But if you haven't, we looked at our capital projects and we looked at the ones that are really critical that we need to move forward. As folks remember, a good example of this is the COA roof is very time sensitive. That was something that was high on the list last year and got pushed off and has now reached a critical point. So when looking at our capital projects and our free cash, we moved certain capital projects that were very time sensitive in nature or lease obligations that we have to pay to the FY21 operating budget capital. And then we took those projects that are important but less time sensitive and put them with our free cash capital. So we kind of moved around some of the capital projects. So we have more capital projects being funded by the free cash article that we will most likely see at a fall town meeting. And so there's less free cash to then plug into the operating budget. At the end of the day, there's still the same amount of dollars being spent on capital. It's just whether the mechanism is through the operating budget or through free cash. So now we're having more through free cash and less through the operating budget. So with that decrease in free cash being plugged into the operating budget, our total revenue decrease from early FY21 to the new FY21 is $303,918. So still, we are at the point of about $20,266,000 $655 in revenue. So we're down that 300,000 in revenue based on our updated local receipts. Do folks have any questions about revenue before I start expense?
I do. Thank you for explaining all that, Jackie. On the Gordon reimbursements for emergency responses, is that assumption because they may be like online school or something, so there'll be less calls, or there'll be a same number of calls, but they won't reimburse it?
Carrie, that's a good question. So it's based on, I know Chris has met with Jeff Baxter about this. We don't know what their plan is going to be for the school year for next year. You know, and then we also saw them leaving campus earlier than usual this year. So we also know that, like, for example, they've already canceled their summer camps that we usually would see. So, you know, we're not expecting quite as much activity on campus for sure. And I think that's something most universities and colleges are prepping for. So obviously we'll know more as we hit August, but in terms of planning for right now, we kind of have to assume that there'll be less calls.
And so that those calls though are often kind of budget neutral though, aren't they?
They give us a reimbursement.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it still is lowering the number nonetheless.
Yeah.
It is typically budget neutral, sort of.
Yeah, so we may see a decrease in our call wages line, but we still need to plan for the fact that, you know, it's hard to plan for emergency services in general with call wages. If you know, plan low and then you have a lot of emergencies, you still have to make up for that. We still have to respond. So I think from the revenue perspective, you know, we're somewhat optimistic that, you know, we may see a decrease in calls. But I think for conservative budgeting, we want to decrease the revenue of the reimbursement and still hold steady with the actual call wages line, because we just can't really plan for what calls we'll have.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to add that that number we're decreasing it by is what we're expecting to receive this year. So we estimated that it was going to be about 50,000 in Gordon College reimbursements this year, and we're projecting now is only going to be around 25,000. So by us decreasing it is just bringing it to our what we think our actual for this current year is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question on the interface between the total free cash and what we're expending on capital from the free cash. Just so I understand this, Chris or Jackie. So we started total free cash of 954,000. We set aside 250,000. That leaves us 704 for allocation. The town is now, I just want to clarify this.
Jim, can I pause you for just a second? Can whoever's sharing their screen, can you open up the free cash capital memo just so we can all see what Jim's describing, just so we're all on the same page? Sorry, Jim, keep going.
That's all right. It's the bottom box at the end of it, which is very helpful.
Lower. Oh, so close. Go up 4 or 5.
It's the summary at the bottom of the capital.
Anthony, you need to go up if you're the one that's on the mouse right now.
Chris is driving.
Okay, it's free cash and capital 5/14/2020. Thanks, Chris. Sorry, Jim. Here it is.
And that is in which document that was sent out? Do we know?
This is the third and final memo that should have been in that set from Chris last week. So this is called free cash and capital.
It's called free cash and capital, May 14th.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so at any rate,
go ahead, Jim.
If I'm understanding it then, so we're down to free cash for applications about 704. We're going to take 266 and apply that to capital. Then we have the library projects revenue from Hamilton. So at the bottom, just so I can understand this, balance of free cash for operating 437, and then net total cash to balance operating 499. What is the difference in that? The 61,000?
Correct. So we'll get as part of our assessment for the library from Hamilton, they're funding the capital projects. So we actually have at the end of the day that 499 that we can balance the operating budget with.
Right.
Because because we'll get that money from
All
them.
right, thank you. I just wanted to be clear about.
Of course. Are folks ready to talk about expenses?
So just one more, so the decision to move those from free cash. So first off, just in general, can you scroll so I can see the top again of this? Thank you very much. I think it's excellent to account for the 25 reduction in state aid, totally appropriate, as is the 75K reduction in motor vehicle. I could totally see that playing out, totally appropriate. You might see a hit to permitting too, because I remain convinced that that's going to slow over time, that projects in flight, even though permitting revenues are good now, that's because contractors have had these lined up for a real long time. But no, that's good. So, you know, on local receipts, you're down 206 basically on like roughly 2.5 million, something like that generally. So, you know,
And I would say,
8%,
Alex,
somewhere in that range.
we definitely went through line by line all of the revenue that we look at. But we are so conservative, for example, permitting fees. When we talked about those a couple of weeks, you can see that we are still very conservative when we do the budgeting, and then we just come out on top. That's where a lot of our, it's where our free cash dollars start to accumulate on an annual basis are with things like permitting. So I think the biggest challenge that we're going to see is that because we are very conservative on our usual revenue projections, we don't have to change as much with this circumstance, but we'll probably see a decrease in our free cash resulting from the FY21 budget. So when we go to certify free cash in fiscal 22 to spend it in fiscal 23, that's when we're going to, I think, see the ramifications of this is in that free cash certification process.
Right. And so we could have left 100,000 funded by free cash, right, for capital. So we're going from 6 to 500,000, right?
Correct.
Net impact being the same on the tax rate.
Correct.
So what's the motivation for the 100,000 in capital to free cash, other than generally speaking,
Sure.
the right thing?
So
Yeah.
we are prioritizing. So we anticipate that we will have the operating budget at a summer town meeting, date TBD, and then a later fall town meeting where we can do more business, and that's where we would do the free cash capital article. And so the thought process being that if we pull the capital items that have a lease obligation or are very time sensitive to that earlier operating budget and get those approved so that we can start to have those commitments from town meeting and start to work on those projects or pay those payments. And then later in the fall, if things change, that free cash, we still have those capital needs, but that free cash is still on the table. And we have a little bit more flexibility when we get to the fall if needed.
If we needed to make cuts so we moved, like, for an example, the COA roof to the operating, because that's critical where some of the other things, as much as we hear about, we wouldn't not want to buy a police cruiser, but if things go awry, then we may need to reconsider some of those capital items.
So this plan kind of presupposes the free cash article be deferred.
Yes.
And separated from the standard. Okay, I'm sorry. I picked up on what you were saying about a secondary special in the fall meeting, but I wasn't tying that back to this free cash move, which I get now. Okay.
It really, I think it just increases our flexibility if something were to change, depending on how the summer goes and depending on how we, COVID continues to trend. It just increases our flexibility.
Right. So, I mean, we could get bare bones on financial articles in a town meeting before June 30th, hypothetically.
Yeah, that's kind of what the plan would be, is this is bare bones.
Thanks. Yep, great. Feel free to continue.
Okay, so going into expense, Chris, can you scroll down a smidge? Thank you. So we asked all the department heads to go back and look at their expense budgets and see if there was anything else that they could indicate that we could lower priority on. And so Chris, Anthony, and myself, either all three of us or a combination of us, met with all of the department heads and had conversations with them. So you can see we do have some reductions for fiscal 21. Some of this is based on looking at actual, some of it's based on saying, we'll forego this for fiscal 21. So, 2,000 in assessing for some small legal costs and mileage, $37,000 in information technology. We're gonna put down the road the infrastructure and investment that we need for the new regional IT service. We're looking at retooling a position in the clerk's office to be more of a shared position. But I think, Anthony, do you want to talk about the late breaking news on that one today?
Yeah, so Diane brought up some concerns and as far as having somebody dedicated to her and part of her budget looked through one more time after COVID. She further reduced her part-time position down to 5 hours. We still wanted that to be a floating position for town hall, but just for the sake of moving this along, we let it stay with 5 hours of part-time per week with Diane, and then the remaining 9 hours that we were proposing goes into town hall for the floating position. So we'll add that to what we were planning on for some permitting hours to create that position there. So in the aggregate, it's all even. It's just we're breaking it down to let Diane have 5 hours a week for coverage.
I have a question. Is it the same person? Is it Terry working for Diane that will be doing the other work?
I'm certainly open to that. I guess that's
Okay.
something we'll have to discuss down the road with her.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
That's a good question. So that line item is the 23?
Yes.
Correct.
So that's going to be updated, and we'll have that updated for the selectmen's meeting, and we can give you the packet the information that goes in the packet, which will be all updated after this meeting. So you have a clean copy, but that's how that's going to work.
Kind of back to that February moment where like things are happening and we can't keep up with our own memos, but we'll have that, sent out with you guys for the weekend as well, if that's helpful.
Well, think of all the paper we're saving, Jackie.
I know, it's so true.
Gotta be some cost savings there.
Yeah.
Yep. No doubt.
So that one being also in this memo later down, it's cost neutral. So we will see also some savings in terms of the clerk's office on education and census expense cuts. We're going to see a $10,000 reduction in building and grounds. We're not going to have any summer helpers this year or any painting done, any of that outdoor maintenance that we usually hire local teens and young college students. So we're going to forego that. We're also going to see a reduction in the police expense for the Pleasant Pond and animal control expenses. As folks may remember, we won't have support from Hamilton this year on the revenue side for Pleasant Pond. And in all likelihood, we're probably not going to be able to open such a small beach and maintain the governor's restrictions for the health and safety. So we have reduced those expenses for fiscal 21.
Hey, Jackie, on
Yes.
Pleasant Pond, is Hamilton out entirely? I know they early in the process stated they weren't really looking to support the program revenue-wise unless it was revenue neutral.
So the revenue projection that is used for this memo shows no Hamilton support, but they're still in process. Anthony, have they given you any?
It also shows the chances of Pleasant Pond opening and working with the association and the police, it's going to be a challenge this year. We all know it. Quite honest, we're having those discussions right now behind the scenes regarding the pool. It's very challenging to do social distancing and something like the pool and able to make it not a cost prohibitor. That probably would run at a loss. So that's another whole story. But Pleasant Pond too, chances are it's going to be, you have to be 12 feet away from each other on the beach. So, it's not a real big beach. So 12 feet away is, maybe 4 families that can use that. So we're just not anticipating anything at Pleasant.
Yeah, for sure. So the IMA is intact and basically it's on hold for the year, basically.
On hold, exactly.
Okay.
But I think to be cautious with the revenue, we pulled that, it's like 9 or 10,000 off the top of my head that we get from Hamilton. So it just made sense to not count on that revenue.
Definitely.
So that shows up in police expense. And then we also see in police capital. So this is one of those capital items that we are moving to the free cash capital for a potential fall town meeting, which is the cost of the replacement vehicle. So as folks know, we replace a vehicle. We have like the 3 cruisers that are on the rotating roster. So this is one of those 3 that gets annually bought every single year. So we move that to the free cash article for a potential fall town meeting. We also reduced the tree warden budget. We're not going to be funding any new tree plantings this year. We kept the maintenance line, but we are not going to add anything new. We saw approximately $17,000 decrease in the vocational school assessment. That's a reduction in the assessment we received from the vocational school. We usually get that so late in the budget season that town meeting we have to go with their earlier estimate. And then later we find out that if it gets reduced and how much by. So this year, because of the delay, we get to count for this reduction in their updated assessment now. So that's included here.
Go over that one more time. I'm not following why there's this reduction in the vocational school. Is it because
So we budget to the max, Carrie, and say if it's 12 students and only 10 get registered,
Mhm.
we find out after the fact. So then they say, well, now you're going to be owing us this much. So we always have to budget to the max because we don't know in time for our budget. So now we know that it's going to be less. So, and we have time before a town meeting that we are reducing it.
So
Okay.
usually this would be one of those contributors to free cash as
Right.
well.
Right.
So then in DPW, they had in their capital a replacement pickup truck with plow. So we've nixed that and have put it up for capital for starting the fiscal 22 capital process. We're also looking at a reduction in the cemetery expense line. They had some tree work that they were hoping to schedule for fiscal 21. So that is potentially going to be postponed. We have a reduction in the COA salary line. We had talked very early on in the budget process about the market rate increases for the part-time roles at the COA to keep them competitive, thinking about the van drivers and the administrative role. So they will receive the same non-union COLA that other non-union part-time positions would receive, but they would not be getting the additional market rate increases this year. We also did a COA expense reduction for a program. Chris, can you scroll a little bit? Thank you. We're looking at $93,000 for library capital. Those are one of those items that moved from the operating budget to the free cash article at a TBD fall town meeting. And then we saw $60,000 in change for employee benefits, and that's due to the transition from Blue Cross to Blue Cross Blue Shield with Maya from Harvard Pilgrim. And I just want to give a shout out to our assistant treasurer collector, Janet Sacco. She came on new to the team very shortly before town hall closed to the public and we started this, and she has managed our insurance carrier transition from Harvard Pilgrim to Blue Cross Blue Shield entirely on Zoom and electronics, and did a phenomenal job getting our data from Harvard and bringing it over to Blue Cross. As an employee, I've never seen such a smooth health insurance open enrollment, and she did it all electronically.
Yeah,
So I
it was-
just really
was
want to
health,
credit her.
it was dental, it was FLSA program, all of those we were able to reduce costs by switching from Harvard to Maya. And so it was great work by Janet. And she was familiar, which was a bonus to us, is that she was working in Topsfield and they had Meyer, so she was very familiar. So it really worked to our advantage and worked well.
That's great.
Anthony, was it FY21 that you were floating that incentive program? for
Yeah.
benefits? Did that take off?
No, we have it, but COVID didn't do us any justice, and just getting the savings for the health insurance, it just was too much to do.
Okay.
So that policy has to go before the Board of Selectmen. So it's something that's on our agenda still to do for next year. And hopefully it's a cost savings to us then. Unfortunately, we just couldn't pull everything off.
No, that's fine. I just wondered I just was curious because I thought that was a creative idea.
Yeah, no, it's not going away. We still have it. We have it in draft form right now that it's hell in abeyance right now.
I have one more quick question to put Catherine on the spot a little bit. Some of the proposed reductions that were floated in other meetings were like reductions in salaries or stipends, like with the Board of Select. Did anything happen with that? I don't remember if there were other ones floated as well, some of the boards and committees.
So we made some reductions. We made the selectmen for FY20. Is that what you're talking about? The FY20 reductions, like Catherine forego her huge salary. She's smiling. And there was a host of other things that we did to cut spending for this year.
I didn't know if any of that was rolling over to FY21 or not, or it's just wait and see what happens.
Just FY20. We have another whole list of potential cuts in the event that the override fails. Then we will have to make some kind of service reductions.
Okay.
So Chris, can you scroll down just a smidge more? So just to quickly wrap up this memo, we do see a couple of increases when you look at the roll-up of the working budget document. So this 21,000 for the town hall salary, that's the evening out of that clerk position, which Anthony had updated you on earlier. So that's just all evening out. We also saw an increase of 21,000 in facilities capital by pulling the COA roof into the operating budget from the free cash article. Chris, can you, oh, thank you. We also see a slight increase in both the Board of Health salary and the Board of Health expense due to COVID-19. We've increased our public health nurses capacity as well as added some part-time health nurses to assist. A lot of the contact tracing and the enforcement of these different actions by the state is happening on the local level. So everything that you see in those phased reopenings, a majority of the enforcement of that comes from the local boards of health. If there's a complaint in the community, we have some support from DPH, but in terms of actually going out to the establishments and to the construction sites and working with residents, that's at the local board of health level. We also are doing our own contact tracing, which is something that we very quickly responded to and added the extra public health nurse capacity. I've heard more challenges than not with the community tracing collaborative. It's a great initiative, and I think, you know, now that more and more people are hearing about it, it's working. But for us, we have a more local number that is calling people, so they're hopefully more likely to pick up. We're getting the updates from our contact tracing to our public safety officials.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Can we take that out? Because we can use CARES money for that. We're only funding this through December. CARES money goes through December 30th. So let's strike out the $10,282 increase and
Okay.
take CARES, okay?
What kind of money is that? I didn't hear that clearly.
The CARES, so it's the coronavirus.
Oh, it's an acronym. Okay.
Yeah.
That you get back from the state kind of thing?
Federal level. So Wenham got around $470,000 that we get to use between March 1st and through December 30th for non-budgeted COVID-related expenses, and it can't be used to offset revenues. So something like that line item, we can take that.
How much of that will you think? 470,000? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
How much of that do you think we might be utilizing?
Not even close, but
Yeah, right.
It's one of the things. And so I've been jumping on a lot of calls, and I was actually on a call last week with Senator Warren. She was doing a call, and I was one of the first questions because I says, we appreciate the federal government thinking of us, that the restrictions that they put on us makes it very difficult for communities like Wenham and a lot of other communities to spend that kind of money that they're giving us.
Right.
What we're really facing is a revenue issue, and that's where we could have benefited from it. So there is a bill up in Congress that passed the House. It's sitting somewhere in the Senate. Now they're just debating it, and I don't know where it'll go, but it's supposed to ease restrictions for local government, although I'm not holding my breath on this one. but it would be nice if it passed. But, you know, if that happens, then we'll use it. In the very least, I plan on pulling it all down into our bank account and help for cash flow.
Yep.
So, but we're definitely going to plan to spend as much as we can, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to get some, just for an example, Jim, we're going to, you know, get a new speed board, which, you know, the big sign that we can put anywhere that says, you know, buckle up or
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
please stay 6 feet apart. So we need another one of those. That would be eligible for funding. We've gotten some PPE already for town meeting. That's eligible for funding. Any additional help like that is referenced in that line, that would be eligible for funding. We put on extra patrols on the weekends and the rail trail and so forth. That's eligible for funding.
Mhm.
So we have some
Jim,
other,
it's helicopter money.
yeah.
What about like longer term kind of PPE for police and fire?
What do you mean by the long?
So,
Like
Carrie,
if
we
we're-
don't get,
if the new normal is wearing PPE on a more, like I have my mask on right now. If that's the new normal, can some of the CARES money be used to stock up on PPE for first responders?
Yeah, well, we don't know how much, we could certainly stock up because we don't know how much we're gonna use. So if we, you know, I don't think we're gonna buy 1 million masks and, you know, at the store, but I know what you're saying. Yes, we believe me, we don't plan to send any money back if we can make it possible.
I'm sorry, Jackie, what?
oh, I was just saying that we have been getting PPE, but if you're talking about the face coverings too, the challenge with police and fire is that they go through the disposable stuff because they have to, like with every new patient, they need clean gear. So that's the biggest challenge, is that they always need to have clean gear. So it's just getting our hands on the new stuff all the time, unfortunately.
So another thing, Karen, when you go and vote, you know, you use that black pen and circle the oval, color in the oval. So we'll be giving you one this year, and it's yours to take home as a souvenir. We paid for that out of the CARES funds. If we do a town meeting and we were doing an tent at Pingree Park and needed to do all of that, then that would be eligible for CARES money.
Would
It's
CARES,
just the gift that keeps on giving.
It really is.
would CARES money be eligible for, I didn't ask any questions about the election officials, and maybe it's a non-issue, but I don't know if that's gonna, because I saw a line item about reducing election official fees or salaries or whatever it is. And so like with CARES Act, is that gonna affect the election at all?
No, it's not. She's going to use volunteers like most other communities do. So we just kind of eliminate the cost there that
Okay.
it's just not sustainable going forward. So we wouldn't use CARES Act for a Band-Aid for a year because it's not budgeted. No, no.
Okay, thanks.
So it sounds like the Board of Health line items, one or both, possibly might fall off for increases.
Not if it's regarding the flu clinics.
Yeah, so I don't think the expense will, unfortunately, because we are hearing from DPH that we need to plan for higher attendance at flu clinics, especially
Okay.
for our high dose senior population. So we're increasing that only because we anticipate that we are going to provide that more locally.
Yeah, that's got to stay. But we get another 10,000 tonight. It was worth every minute.
So this is eligible just through the December, right? Did you say, Anthony?
Yes, through December right now.
So if they, I was thinking about flu and vaccines, they're not going to get a vaccine by the end of December.
No, but I know what you're thinking. If there was a vaccine and we could vaccinate everybody in Wenham.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, certainly,
exactly.
you know, fortunately, we haven't had any cluster cases where we might do some mass testing like
Yeah.
Hamilton did over the weekend.
Yeah.
That's something that we could use this for.
Okay. So one thing I noticed is the difference in the, sorry, I try to scroll on the screen share, and obviously that's not doesn't work too well. The shoot, what did I do with it? It was the town clerk thing where, oh, here we go. So it was, I thought the difference was more like 15,000 and 5,000 or something like that. So it was 23,166. That's gonna come down to some amount, right?
Right.
And then towards the end there, it's 21,500 that goes up. I thought it was a bigger difference. I thought it was like,
I think it's still, is it still a little positive, Jackie, or no? Is it still, or is it breaking?
I think after today, with the discussions that we've been having with Diane about the 5-hour week and then the other piece, I think it's just going to be a wash, maybe a couple $100 of savings, but not anything to
okay, that's fine.
be very excited about, unfortunately.
That's fine. I thought it was more like a 20K and 15K, like a slightly larger difference. No big deal. Not trying to split hairs over a few bucks.
Yep.
Okay, so recap. So bring us on home. So what are the big picture numbers?
Here's where we are as of May 14th. So obviously there are still things that are up in the air, and we're going to have more information for you between tomorrow and Friday. That's going to go to the BOS. But we're still roughly in the same area for the deficit of the 1,083,000. But we're optimistic because Anthony, I don't know if you want to talk about this. There's a discrepancy in how we've been billing Hamilton. So there will be some increased assessment dollars on our revenue side from Hamilton. We're the lead community for the library and for inspectional services. So we have actually more administrative funds from Hamilton coming our way. So hopefully that'll knock this deficit number under $1 million.
Yeah. Which we know, because we have that other form that I'd like to pull up to show what the override would be, Jackie. So yeah,
I'm not in charge of the screen. Sorry. So
I have Alex, Chris, I can pull it up. I have it. If you stop sharing. So what Jackie's referencing, oh, there you go. So, so what Jackie's referencing is the, we have the right in the IMA of the IMAs for joint services to charge a 10% administration fee. What we've discovered in the past couple of weeks is that for the past 5 years, we haven't been taking advantage of that. And yet Hamilton does take advantage of that. So this year we are taking advantage of that. And I've let Joe know that we'll be looking for an additional $80,000 roughly, between $70,000 and $80,000 from Hamilton for the 10% administration fee for the joint library and inspectional services. In addition, Chris, can you pull up the sheet with regard to the health insurance? So in addition, before when we started the budget year, I think if you remember me talking during the financial forecast to say that we were projecting a 7% increase for health insurance. And that was in September. So as you recall, we had some unfortunate, an employee have a serious issue, and come March, our number for increase went to 14.9%. So I wanted to try to quantify, and then that was an employee in the joint services. So that's one of those things where it's great being the lead community, but you end up eating something like this and it becomes just a percentage increase for Wenham. So I forwarded this off to Hamilton because I'm looking to, at the delta from the 14.9% increase to what we were projecting at the 7, that's $62,000, of which I'd like Hamilton to contribute 61% of that, which is $38,000. So we're looking to get now over $100,000 from Hamilton. So they're aware of this, and haven't heard anything back. So with that, if Chris, bring up the override option there. Yeah. So with that,
do you mind if I interrupt for just 1 second, Anthony?
Sure.
So before, because I know the override stuff is key, but just going back to the memo. So we have 305 in reductions. And then the increases look to be about 60. They're not subtotal, but no big deal. It's just 21.5 and 21 is 42.5 plus the 6,300 is like, you know, call it 50,000, 60,000 ish. So I'm just wondering, so like with 345 in reduction, 305 in reductions and roughly 60 in increases, that's about a net decrease of about 245, something like that. So with these, the deficit appears to be the same, was it not, with our 360 and 720 at 1.085, somewhere in that range?
So it was 361, 100, our override amount?
Yep.
Yep. And now it's going to go down to $256,069. Actually, it'll go down by another
Okay.
$10,000 because we're going to move out that other money. So,
And not reflected in the memo, in other words.
right.
But you can't change anything on the ballot. So whatever your override amount is.
So what happens on the ballot, Mike, is town meeting will be going to vote those ballot questions, and
Yep.
they're basically voting to raise the levy limit above Proposition 2.5. Now, we're going to change the warrant articles, or at least that's our plan, and to reduce our budget, so our ask is only 256. So
Break. So your ballot for the override for the town is not 200, it's 300. You can't change that.
Right, that's right. You can't change that. So the ballot override question will still be 361, 100 for the town,
Right.
722, 640 for the schools.
Right, so if that gets people approve all of that and you come in less than that, then that's just more money for you to readjust once you get it all done.
No. So town meeting appropriates up to the levy limit.
Yep.
So we're not going to be asking for the 361. So we can't spend above the 256, the additional 256 that we're asking for. So that just remains in levy capacity, which we have none of.
Got it?
That will sit. You good?
No.
All right.
So I just want to go back to my earlier point. So the memo from the 14th that outlines the reductions and then increases shows 305, 541 in reductions, then 59,000 in increases. It wasn't too far off, 59,030, for a net difference of 246,500 in net reduction, right? So the deficit, I would think, wouldn't that be reduced by that amount? What am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing something big and glaring.
So Alex, so going back to like last week when we put out these memos, we had what I just went over for revenue reductions and what I went over for expense reductions. And the deficit, if you can look at the screen what Chris is sharing, was still in that 1.08 million range. So originally we were at 1,085,000 for the deficit, and the reduction in revenue, the reduction in expense evened out, and it ended up being that it was about 1,083,000 in the deficit. So as of the last couple of days, as additional changes have occurred, we have found other revenues and other expenses, and unfortunately things are still a bit of a moving target. So as
I get
today,
that. Before we go to the late breaking with the Hamilton stuff, I'm just trying to reconcile. Our deficit was always roughly 1,085, 1,083, same
correct.
thing. Call it 1.1 million. 360 and 720, the numbers were convenient, right, for the town and school overrides respectively. So, but the expense reductions, which you've all worked diligently to assemble, total 305, and then there's a couple increases that total 60. So I would think that incorporating those, again, prior to the late breaking stuff, would still reduce the deficit potentially by the amount that I come up with is $250,000 in net expense reductions.
But
I'm just,
Alex, then you need to factor in the revenue
Right.
decrease into that.
That's the revenue. Thank you, Chris. That's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for. So we know that's where we knock off the couple $100 grand, right?
300, 200,
Or-
200 was,
What's the amount?
and 100 was state, so it was 300 total.
300?
Mhm.
Close enough? Is that what,
Yeah.
303, 304?
3918, yeah.
I'm going to call it 304. And then take that difference. I come up with like $57,000 difference. So we have a reduction, a net reduction in expenditures offset by a greater net reduction in revenue. I'm going to call it, its total round number is 250,000 reduction in expenditures net, and an anticipated revenue reduction of 300,000, which puts us worsened by, I'm going to call it 50,000. So in some ways, the deficit could have been, might have reflected from, I'm going to call it 1.083 or 1.085 to 1.13, like 50 grand worsened. And I'm just trying to come up with that 50,000 difference. Does that make any sense?
I think, Alex, is the point that you're trying to get to, that like when we talk about our deficit, it is really a structural deficit, because even with nipping and tucking and trying to make up for lost revenue due to COVID, we still can't really get that deficit number lower because it's a big deficit. And we really worked hard in the expense side, moving things around, finding small dollars where we could to try to make up for those revenues that are lost. But overall, we still have a deficit that's really challenging to overcome.
For sure. And I guess maybe I don't want to keep us going all night here on this one key point. If you could help me find that difference and to what I should attribute that difference. Big picture numbers, we had I'm going to call it 1.1 million deficit. You did appropriately reduce revenue by 304,000. You then reduced expenses by a net of 250. So because the reduction in revenue was greater than the reduction in expenses, that puts you in a worse situation. The difference I see is 57,000-ish, 60,000. So I would have thought that the 1.085, which didn't really change, 1.085, 1.083, it's the same, would have actually jumped. So I'll spell this out after in an email and just let me know.
I think, Alex,
Yeah.
I think what you're looking at is that it's roughly 303,000 in revenue reduction.
Yep.
And then by my notes from last week, it was roughly like 285,000, maybe that's a little high, in changes to the expense side of the budget. So on the expense side of the budget, we had a couple of ups and a lot of downs. But overall, I think the gap between revenue and expense that you're talking about is actually a little smaller if we're talking about big numbers. So it's where we see roughly the slight decrease in the old deficit to the new deficit.
Okay. I mean, the memo that you just walked us through with the increases starting with starting with legal costs, 2,000, and ending with Maya, Blue Cross Blue Shield, totals 305. 305 decreases. And there's only 4 increases, which I totaled up to be $59,030. So I just took the difference in those two numbers, and got a net savings of 246,000. I think what you were saying just now is that it might be higher, to closer to 285 or 300. Again, it being closer in line with the reduction in revenue of, call it 300,000, would support the structural deficit of 1.085 not really changing. But I guess I was thinking, even before we get to the Hamilton stuff, those updates, that it would actually have been lower based on that.
So Alex, can I show,
Yep.
Chris, can you put the working budget summary up for me? The one dated 5/14, please, that was included with this memo.
We looking at the two red columns?
Yes, we are. And if we
Yep.
can go to the last page of it.
Yep.
So, yeah, thanks, Chris. And then go to the page 13. So Alex, I think what we're looking at right now, so if you look, Chris, can you put your cursor on grand total, but all the way to the right aligned column? So that would be our total, can you go up to the 305? So that's our total decrease on the expense side. When everything is added all together, you see that decrease of 305,000 on the expense side. And
Yep.
then you can see total revenue and free cash. We have a total decrease on the revenue side of the 303,000. And so that's where you see the deficit only going down that like couple $1,000s overall. And you can see where our FY21 original deficit was versus the FY21 post-COVID.
Yep.
That's currently in flux.
I'm with you. So I can make all those numbers work with the exception of the 305,541 because you have expense increases, which are separately detailed in that memo, which total 59,000.
Yes, but so I think at least one of them is the wash of the clerk position. And then that part of that is the capital that's going in and the capital that's going out. So I'm wondering if there's something I skipped on the memo from an expense change that's not, is maybe the reason why it's not tying out, because Chris and I both went over that list and I'm wondering if I'm missing something on the list. But I would say that I would definitely go with the numbers that are in the FY21 overview. And if you look, you can actually see in that far right pink column, and I don't know why I'm pointing at it like you can see me pointing at it, so I apologize. But that will show you line by line where those savings are, and I may have missed one in the memo that, and Chris maybe didn't pick up my.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I think each of the line items it makes sense in terms of the context and description. I couldn't figure out the expense increase seemingly not being factored in. So if my question still, which I think it still stands, if it makes sense, then we could just follow up later because it could be something I'm missing.
I have a question. If you were
Shoot.
done, Alex.
Yep,
Okay.
I am. Thanks.
It goes to Anthony. Just going back to the percentage that we did not bill Hamilton, that roughly $100,000. Is that 1 year's worth or is that 5 years worth?
1 year's worth.
Have we thought about going back if they've been doing it for 4 years, 5 years? No.
No, you
Okay.
can't go back to prior years. You just can't do that. They would need an authorization at town meeting, and then it's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's gone.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I derailed us with the question, and Anthony, you were going to show us the tax rate impact, so that stuff was also
Yeah.
provided in the email. So if you want to jump back to that.
Yeah. So this is this was a spreadsheet that we put together that how we broke down the town school override amount. And in the middle section, the two darkened bordered boxes at the end, the one to the left, that was the one that originally we had post-COVID, we needed an override for 361,100, and the schools 722,640. After all of the changes that you've heard about, we're now going to ask town meeting only for 256,69, $256,069, and the schools would remain the same. So then that goes back to Mike's question, which I think that he's still fuzzy about. Mike, you want to circle back on that?
Well, I thought because the ballots have already been printed and it has the amount of the override, you can't change it. So what you're voting for is the actual amount of the override.
What you're voting for, you're right. You can't change the ballot. You're right on that. And what you're asking is, what they're asking the voters to raise a certain amount of money above Proposition 2.5. So basically raise the levy limit above Proposition 2.5. And those were the dollar amounts that we were looking for before. Now, a lot of stuff has happened since then, And now, yes, so that's what the voters are going to be voting for. But at town meeting, we're going to say, but only appropriate $256.69 for the town and still the $722,640 for the schools.
Gotcha. I understand now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You think it's possible that some people would have voted, this is backseat benching here, but would have voted for the 256 and maybe they didn't vote to support the 361?
I was thinking that too.
You know, it's entirely possible. That's why to, get this moving along and getting this out to the voters before everybody, votes I think is important because I think in all this, there's a good message, I think, here. I think that what this shows to town is that, we went back, we looked at the revenues, we made revenue adjustments, we lowered them, we moved around some expenses, pushed off some projects that probably weren't going to happen because of COVID-19, because we weren't going to have time to get to them. And now say, despite our revenue loss, we're still now we've been able to bring that override down to 256,000.
Is it? I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. If someone voted to not support the 361, and then here they sit at town meeting and say, you know what, geez, the town worked hard, they reduced it by $100,000. I want to support the 256. Can they do that? If they did a mail-in ballot?
You can only vote twice, Jim, if you can vote multiple times under certain
You're in
circumstances.
Chicago or something?
Yeah. It helps if you're deceased.
But
Yeah.
I think, oh,
So if it were to fail at the ballot, but then pass at town meeting, we would get another shot for another ballot
Or
question.
another ballot? Oh, thank you.
If the town so wanted.
Yeah, that's
So that's
probably what I was trying to.
So it all hinged on that one person. There was two. We were all thinking the same thing, like to the extent they differ hugely, right? And I think it shows more than a token, it shows a meaningful reduction. We didn't eliminate the override through the, through the vicissitudes of this FY21 budget process, but definitely a concerted effort, and along the way found some good news, not to our friends and neighboring community next door with the administrative expenses, but be that as it may, I mean, we're bringing it down pretty meaningfully, and I think that. I think that it shows, more than a good faith effort for
And
FY21.
maybe I'm getting too much into the minutia, but so if we do a 1/12 budget and then have a vote at town meeting for the rest of FY21, that number would come down again.
It would just be reconciliation at that point and doing the difference, Carrie. It's kind of an accounting nightmare.
Yeah.
So long
Yeah.
as it goes on, but
The other thing is, Anthony, and we've all sort of talked about this, is I think in any kind of budget briefings that we do, we should really highlight this and articulate it,
Absolutely.
as well as at town meeting, if town meeting happens before the vote.
yeah.
So, go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, so you'd have to adjust your budget message for the budget book because now the message is different, obviously. So that'll be an opportunity too to highlight this. And then during the budget forums that we should try to have, ideally, maybe even scheduling a budget forum before the 25th, before the election, despite if we have a town meeting or not.
Yep.
That might be another good idea. I think that once the FinCom is happy and satisfied that this will be the FY21 budget, the selectmen get this. Once they do their recommendation on the warrant articles, open the warrant article, insert the new warrant article, close it, do their recommendations, then, I think it's getting it out there. We obviously can't, so one thing that bothers me is, unlike the state, when you have a ballot question, you can send out those red books, which explains what you're voting on. We don't get to do that on the local level, which to me is,
That's very unfortunate.
It is unfortunate because not that I want to sway a voter either way, because I want them to know the both sides of that, just like the Red Book does. But we're not able to do that. So we can't do a mailing. We can't do any of that stuff. But go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, so if we have, I'm just jumping ahead here, another hypothetical. If there's no town meeting before June 30th, the results of the ballot votes related to the financial warrant articles are what? Entirely irrelevant?
No.
Or do they carry forward to a special?
I'm sorry, say it again, Alex.
The results of the voting on the financial warrant the ballot articles related to the override, the two overrides. What is their relevance without a town meeting before the 30th? Is it retained?
Yeah,
Results?
It just,
okay, for a special?
It just holds. It just holds. It waits for the election.
Right.
I think it might be that there's like 90 days. It's like we have maybe 3 months that we have to act. That timeline comes into play.
Right.
But I think that's because of the school budget more than it is because of ours.
Yeah, there's a whole host of probably legal questions that we're going to have to get answered.
Without a doubt. And and other communities would face them too. My hope is that we do not have to invoke a 1/12 budget. I know we're proceeding with having prepared one regardless. I certainly hope that we can make a town meeting happy, and I completely appreciate, and first of all, it's not my call whatsoever, it's that of the select boards, but I can appreciate that residents, many will not feel comfortable in even an outdoor setting. And that may be the case for years to come, quite frankly. So I don't know how we would reconcile that other than to make the best possible effort to reduce those non-financial matters to the town that relate to bylaws and the like. And non-critical fundings, non-critical financial matters to keep the town afloat. Though 1/12 will do that, I don't think it's ideal. But it would of course have to have a majorly stripped down set of warrant articles. I would suspect, and I think our budget forum efforts to educate the public via the Zoom means would also relate to only those core articles that remained. So we're happy to have a budget. Sign us up for a budget forum or a couple of them, whatever is appropriate. I think we're just going to get questions right and left about, well, what if there's no town meeting? I mean, the number of times that we've hashed this out together as our Brady Bunch imagery will be multiplied exponentially with the exact same questions and confusion and lack of clarity with respect to town meeting or no town meeting and what happens with the ballot and everything else. And that's not what a budget forum, in my mind, should address. So I think we need clarity on town meeting or no town meeting, which is not easy. So I don't have the select board figuring that one out. I think we need it regardless going into any budget forum, which is to say, town meeting will take place on such and such date, and here's how the financial articles play out with regard to tax rate impact, et cetera, and the underlying reasons for the overrides and our efforts to reduce FY21 and so on and so forth. Or we're happy to have you for a budget forum and town meeting will not take place, and here's what happens with your votes that you've cast at on the ballot by June 25th. And what to look forward to in a special town meeting and what the overall budget we expect to be, but won't be in place for months, but to be taken up in the meantime via 1/12. So that's just my thought in general. I don't know if anyone else has any differences of view.
Just as a citizen and not as a FinCom member, I would encourage, given the challenges of setting up a town meeting by the 20th, but given that, I would encourage the selectmen to do their best to try to hold the town meeting by the 20th.
And Jim, I don't know that it need be the 20th. I think June 30th, right? Or no, because of the
June
election
20th.
on the 25th. Is that?
No, the town meeting by June 20, I think. So
That's
it's
right, it would have to be.
simultaneous.
My bad.
So it's the same as the Hamilton town meeting.
and I said this last week or the week before, obviously, however structurally it might play out with respect to the venue and everything else, I have no idea. And if anyone who isn't comfortable, and I don't even know that I'd be comfortable, so here I am,
I know.
you know,
It's-
saying
it's
we should
just
do
my-
this.
It's just
It's just,
as a
yeah, it's
citizen.
the world we're in now. So obviously
And
there's,
as a- I don't know if Catherine's, is
it is.
Catherine still on the line?
yes.
Can Catherine speak to that, or is she uncomfortable speaking to that now?
I would never presume to speak for the entire Board of Selectmen on that issue.
I understand.
I certainly have my own personal opinion, but, and I am hoping that this will be on our agenda. Anthony can confirm that for next Tuesday, and we'll have an open meeting and a discussion and hopefully, you know, make a decision then, but I can't speak for the board on that one.
Okay, thank you, Catherine.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Any other comments or thoughts on where we are now? So in terms of going forward, I guess the next steps obviously are, we'll be on the receiving end of any changes from the schools, but we're not waiting for them. We have, you know, like I said at the onset of the call, we have no jurisdiction over their budget. So we're not really, all we can do is proceed with our current budget. Thanks to the efforts of Chris and Jackie, we've now got a number of reductions, Anthony's work also. So our FY21 budget appears to be in good shape. I would love it if we could just get clarity afterwards on, I see Jackie nodding, thank you, and just on that matter, dump it into Excel, nothing fancy. And then perhaps next week when we reconvene, we can be in a position to all know the artifact of the working budget summary. It's, I think the most recent is dated May 14th. Is that correct still, Chris? Or is there a newer one? No, there's a newer one that was just sent already.
Yes,
Yeah, I have the 14th
should be
one
a newer
open.
one.
I think
Is it-
Alex, you'll probably get a set of everything new in one compact email when we do the BOS packet for Tuesday. So I
okay.
think that'll,
Makes sense.
Anthony, can we just share the whole BOS packet with the FinCom rather than having separate iterations or separate, like we can just, when we send out the BOS packet, we can send it to the FinCom too, so that we're all working on the same set.
Sure.
What I mean, recognizing there may be other matters for BOS too, whatever works, but yeah, the roll up is the key item here for us to be keenly aware of, in particular, where we landed with our original budget that we were ready to set forth to the town, and the changes in the post-COVID column. And then I guess at that point, it would be nice if we were in a position, I suppose, to kind of you know, we're not voting on or approving, we already have our budget. What we should be doing at this stage, as it being as early as possible, especially in advance of the select board's meeting next Tuesday, is to express as a committee our support for the numbers that we've seen tonight. So the deficit's still at 1,083,740. The breakdown of the two overrides with the reduced town operating override amount, to express a show of support for or lack thereof. And let's get a temp check. We'll go around the horn in just a minute, because that could very well be our final budget, pending any, you know, final little last minute tweaks to the numbers as Chris and Jackie go through them. So FinCom, any concerns with proceeding with this for FY21, knowing we'll have a 1/12 also as a backup?
Just one quick question, Alex. You're using the 1.083, and why aren't we using the 978,709 number?
We are, Jim. The form just, it just needs to be updated. So it's just,
So
Sorry,
it is
yep.
978,709.
My bad.
yeah, it's going to be,
$1 million bucks.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay. Yep.
Yep,
Yeah.
$1 million bucks. It was 1.1. It's $1 million deficit. Yep, I'm looking at yeah.
Okay.
I should be looking at the newer one, but my bad. Yeah. So, anyone have any thoughts or reservations with basically proceeding after our the past 6 or 7 weeks of looking closely at this, like thinking about changes to revenue and expenses post-COVID? Or are we comfortable with this for FY21?
I am comfortable with this for FY21. I appreciate all the work that everyone put into to all the revisions and the multifaceted budget approach and dual tracking that we're doing. I was on the fence. I know that I'm going beyond your question, Alex, but I was a little bit on the fence about having a meeting on June 20th. But I've thought about it more, and I appreciate all the thought that's going into keeping it distancing possible. So I support having the meeting on the 20th at this juncture, and said so in the survey. And I have another thing to talk about, just logistics, but I can do that later. If you want to keep getting.
Okay. Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks, Carrie.
I'm in support of the changes that have been made and with our current numbers.
Thanks, Jim. Mike?
I'm in support also.
You are? Okay.
Yep.
Mike, how about you?
No comments. I'm good.
Are you in support of the numbers that we've seen tonight? Kind of, and when I say that, I guess there are two elements that, one, are we comfortable with this being a revised budget that we worked so hard for initially before COVID, given these changes? So we were in a good place before. Do we like these changes to move forward? Essentially, I think that the key indicator is, if we're all in support of it, then Anthony can, in meeting with the select board, say, here's FinCom's FY21 budget that they want to put forth to the town, recognizing that, as you pointed out, Mike, the ballot figures don't line up perfectly, so we appropriate a little bit less if we were to authorize more, and so on. And also that I want to just raise the matter of voting for support of the articles. Initially, I had thought that it would likely be the case that I don't know why I thought this at the time, recast votes for recommendations to town meeting. Now, what town meeting form it takes on is obviously quite different than it was back then. I now don't feel like there's like we should be compelled to revote on those, even the primary ones of Article 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is loose leaf, 5 is schools. I'd been thinking, and perhaps we still reserve the right to do so, but if hypothetically the schools doubled the assessment, right, then FinCom members may wish to recast vote as a whole, as a committee, as to recommended action for that override. But from my personal perspective, and then I'll open it up for others to just general comments on FY21, as well as whether or not, let me know if you wish to take another vote on this. But from my personal perspective, I don't feel as though I need to.
I don't feel a need to revote, and if we did, my votes would be the same. The numbers are essentially the same that we voted on a month ago.
It's a good point. I guess it might sway someone who voted against the town, but that was
It was 5-0. We all voted to
Yeah, I was
support
going to say
that.
it's unanimous support. So right,
That's the
that's
school budget.
reasonable.
I
Yeah.
did support their request.
Yep. Okay.
I think their request now, they're going to be in more trouble now than even before.
And this would be an action that, if people wanted to, we would take as soon as possible. The only reason I would say that we wouldn't do so tonight, if people wanted to, would be because I would like to just get a little bit of clarification on those numbers that we talked about. But yeah, Jackie might already have it. Jackie, just before you do, Phil said thank you. What about other FinCom members with regard to voting?
Yeah, I don't have, my vote would not change.
Okay.
Yeah, practically speaking, the school isn't changing. Our numbers for the schools are not changing. The school budget's changing, but not in relation to our assessment. So I don't have any changes there. And with the town, it's not going up, it's going down. And so then my question is, practically speaking, what's the impact on the town? What are the detrimental impacts and how this plays out? But I know that everyone's taking care to try to make cuts that make as much sense as possible and to minimize those kind of impacts. And it's kind of unavoidable at this point because of COVID-19. So, increases aren't there, decreases unavoidable. So I don't see a need to vote either.
Okay.
My vote hasn't changed from when we voted before, so I laud the town for even finding more cuts. Again, I would just suggest that when you go to the Board of Selectmen next week, that they fully understand the legal, I'll repeat the word legal, ramifications of two separate numbers, one on the ballot and one in a town meeting, and what it really means. That's all I'm suggesting, so you don't add confusion.
Makes sense.
That's all I'm saying. Everything else is good
Cool.
to go.
Okay. Jackie, you did have something, so I cut you off. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to let FinCom know that the reason why I asked Anthony about sending the full BOS packet is that there'll also be updated versions of all of the priority financial articles in their packet for this weekend. So if folks do have questions or comments about those, you'll see those with the updated numbers, same language in that packet as well, in case you have questions prior to your meeting next week.
So thanks, Jackie. So will that be something that the Board of Selectmen will do Tuesday, is determine whether to open the warrant and, I suppose, shuffle about the articles, perhaps remove articles to lighten it up? Is that how it goes?
I think it's at this point for informational purposes that they're getting those updated warrant articles. I don't think they're scheduled to vote on them quite yet. Anthony, are you-
Again, I caution this conversation and where it's going.
Yeah, it's right now, just wait to see what the agenda comes out on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
gonna, right now, it's just, it's a draft agenda says discussion and potential vote just for town meeting, but there's discussions to be had around location and quorums and,
Yep.
so they have to have some dialogue with that before, get the results of the survey. They want to know the results of the
Yep.
survey. We'll have that.
Yep.
So
But I guess yeah. I'm not trying to preempt the select board meeting at all. So let's don't worry too much about that. I think my question is procedurally, if we had, is more generally speaking, if we did proceed with a town meeting and fewer warrant articles, the warrant would be reopened and those would need to be changed. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's cleaner to do that so the folks at town meeting clearly know what they're voting to appropriate.
Okay.
And
It's just a how it works question, not that I expect it to all be resolved Tuesday. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So, well, why do you keep forcing me to keep asking the question? So what you're telling me is town meeting overrides ballot.
Nope. Town meeting appropriates the funds. The election,
Authorizes.
right, it authorizes the amount to be spent. Town meeting determines the amount up to what you can spend. Town meeting says what you can spend. Is that putting it kind of in?
Mhm.
Right.
Another way to frame it too.
It's my understanding, at least on the federal side, authorization trumps appropriation.
No.
I can get appropriated, but no one authorizes it.
Well, on the negative side, on the no-go side, it would, right? You can appropriate $1 million if you only authorize $1, then that trumps it.
Yep.
Right.
On the flip side, where there's excess capacity, if you only spend $1 but you appropriate, if you only appropriate
Appropriate.
$1 but you authorize $1 million, you still only spend $1.
That's right. Town meeting tells you what you can
Yep.
spend.
Got it.
Yep. And that's all. And yeah, and also I wasn't suggesting that we change the amounts of them. I was thinking number wise, like, we're all assigned, should town meeting happen, understanding that's an if. We obviously have our articles for which we're responsible to present to the governing body, and just if there were fewer, in the spirit of lightening the load and having it more expediting the process.
Alex, to my point, that's where we would have a list for you guys of what those priority financial articles are, like the ones that we, if we were to proceed with a town meeting at some point, the ones that we couldn't live without versus so that would be what we're including is that list of articles that we really need to accomplish when town meeting occurs, whether it's later in the summer or whenever it's decided, we would show you that list of priorities.
Got it.
Good. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, we have covered a lot. I'm out of questions. But you have one on logistics, you said, Carrie, right?
Sort of. I'm just
Or
kind of
something.
backward mapping from if the Board of Select votes to have a town meeting on the 20th. So their next meeting is June 2nd. That roughly gives us like 2.5 weeks to prepare, to do budget forums and prepare otherwise, and about 3.5 weeks before there's a ballot vote. So I guess I'm just thinking about where do budget forums fit in and what's our, in addition to budget forums, kind of what's our plan to get the word out and to educate people about the status of the budget and the changes.
If I can give a little update, as far as when we did the forums with the COVID, regarding COVID-19, we did a forum starting at 3 o'clock, and then we redid that at, was it 7 o'clock, Jackie? Yeah. So we tried to get a good group of people. Normally, I think you would have, and actually you did do something on a Saturday way back in February, didn't you, Alex, at the COA? Yes.
Yeah.
Normally you do a Saturday.
Yep, and Jim and Mike, yep.
Yeah, I don't know if you would need to do a Saturday again, or you do it like the forum that we did for COVID. Your call. We had a pretty good response. What do we have, Jackie, on the calls? Did we have about 50?
About 50 on the 3 o'clock call and about 30 on the 7 o'clock call. And then we had our most recent forum, we had another 30.
Yeah.
So people are really, and I would say kind of different groups of people on all 3 of those calls. So I think people are actually more eagerly ready to engage on Zoom than they have been coming to town hall for events like this.
And we did do a mailing, or we were going to do a mailing for those forums and for the warrant hearing. Yeah, Nikki had them made up. We ended up throwing them away because we couldn't use them because we never had it because of COVID-19. So we could advertise when the selectmen do make that final determination. Like a postcard is going to go out for the election. We'll do the same thing for all these important dates regarding town meeting and the warrant hearing and budget forums. And
I will say though, I think that the postcard, I don't know if we can add a Zoom hearing onto that postcard because it has to go out the day after the BOS vote for the location change to the Bucher. But we honestly, the one thing about COVID, we are seeing an increase of people engaging with us on social media. We're seeing an increase in people signing up for our robocall, and we're seeing an increase. I was looking at the Google Analytics for the website recently, and we are seeing an increase of people going to our website for information. So I think whenever the FinCom decides to move forward with budget updates, whatever form those take, I think we're going to have a really good chance of getting that out to people through those methods. That's how we've done a lot of our other information. And I think people are looking to engage with the town right now because I think so much of this situation is being managed on a local level. So it's a great opportunity for the FinCom to kind of get out there and to, really talk about the issues that are ongoing and the issues that are related to COVID. I think you have a very, people are eager to connect with each other right now. So it's one kind of positive.
And are your COVID meetings, are those available? I haven't looked and I missed them, unfortunately. Are those available as replays on the webpage? Oh, great.
On our page and on the HWCAM YouTube. And you can also click the frequently asked questions. We did a typed version of the transcript.
Oh, fantastic.
If you wanted to read it instead.
Okay.
So I think there's value for residents for sure in having a budget forum to talk about the warrant, the override votes at the ballot and the FY21 budget-related warrant articles that are voted on at town meeting whenever that happens. But I do think there's also, it's important for us to, in planning how we deliver that message and the particulars of how it all plays out, it's important for us to know whether or not we'll have a town meeting or whether we should plan for a special, because that will let us basically guide the information, because there, you know, there's the financial and logistical stuff is all inextricably linked right now, right? I mean, that's why we're talking so much about, you know, if, when, then town meeting stuff. It's not because we're trying to take the decision away from BOS. It's because of the implications to things like 112 and the like. So that would be important for us to know, I think, as we plan for our messaging. In some ways,
To stand at town hall if we have an in-person election, I guess we're having to answer people's questions about the ballot question.
You actually just reminded me, Carrie. I think another thing that would be really helpful is like a frequently asked questions. If the town is putting out like an electronic email blast, whatever, saying, here's a budget form on this date, here's a Zoom, whatever, kick back, reply with any questions that you want the FinCom to address.
Mhm.
And you know, town officials, because I've been on a lot of, just on one yesterday, they're, you know, 60, 70 person research meetings within my company. And there's, you know, 2 presenters and they're sharing the screen. And then there's two people who are paid to talk when no one else wants to. But other than that, no one else asks questions. So they'll revert to the frequently asked questions that they had received in advance. And I think that worked really well in our meeting or in some of these meetings. And you know, even if we had 10 questions, you know, just a handful of questions from residents, not only that help us shape the message delivery in an efficient manner, but can fill some of the void, because I don't know how well the chat and everything else goes. I'm
Alex,
just looking
the
at the chat
other
now.
method that we've been using with good success is setting up a Google form to receive questions. And we also have the capacity to take questions live in the chat function of Zoom. So we have those options for you as well as the email in advance. So we can get you like a whole list of questions the day before, so you know who can speak to what.
Yep. And speaking of questions, I have one from Gary from earlier. Can we get clarification? This is a good question, Gary. Governor's approval for 112 budget, this is back to Chris and Jackie, just to revisit the 112 real quick. I'm curious about this. Is it FY20 or is it in any way related to FY21, or is it just FY20 budget? And is it expenditures? Because I think when I was reading the email earlier, it was like actual cost versus budgeted. Does that make sense? What's the basis for the 112? Is it FY20 budgeted or FY20 costs?
Yeah, so it's the FY20 budgeted amounts, with exceptions for, like I mentioned, for the school assessments. We know we have increased costs in trash. So stuff we know with our contracts, those we fund the increases. Everything else is based off of the budgeted FY20 amount.
So the language is basically go off FY20, but it's vague enough to say if you have contractual obligations, or it specifically references school districts and stuff like that. So we know
Yes.
that to be the case.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Good with me. Gary? Good. Thank you. Cool. I said it before, but now I mean it. I'm out of questions. And I appreciate all the work on the town side, especially in FinCon. I mean, it's been a long haul, obviously, for this past bunch of weeks. So I feel like we're in a position where we've got some clarity on what we're doing with FY21. Pending any minor tweaks, let's look for the roll up. Let's look for, because that will be what we present to the town in part, or to support our messaging to the town, the 12, 13 pager Excel, red columns off to the right. And we'll look for the information to just learn about what the BOS are discussing next week, specifics there. And then just lastly, that tax rate scenario piece had been updated. Thank you, Anthony. You were going to present it earlier. I don't know that we spent much time on it, but it was distributed out to everybody. And shows the update based on the $1 million override down from 1.1 roughly.
Yeah, we'll have a nice complete package. Jackie and Chris are gonna send me all the documents again after they've been tweaked and updated after tonight's meeting, and you'll get everything. It shows, even with the tax rate, it'll show where it was to what it is now, and a lot of documentation that you'll be getting, and I think it'll be clear for.
Okay, sounds good. We have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, correct?
Correct.
We have two, Jackie, you had asked through June, we have June 3rd, but then we don't have any scheduled after that, correct, based on my reply? Or do we have the 3rd and 10th? I forget.
I didn't delete the 10th because I had already scheduled it. So if you want me to delete it, Chris did mention adding a late June meeting on the books for year-end transfers though.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we, so we'll reconvene next Wednesday, the 10th.
Next week, the 3rd.
Sorry, the 3rd. Thank you. The 3rd. And then pending at that time whether or not, or maybe we go as far as the 4th or 5th, just in case there's anything late breaking. If we don't need the 10th, we might just defer that until the year-end, the transfers as needed, which there typically is when we usually have the year-end transfers discussion. We're talking about between accounts, not RFTs, but between accounts.
Correct.
We have to do that anyway, don't we?
Yes, there are some deficits right now, some as of May 1 that we will need to do some year-end transfers for.
Okay. Okay. So hypothetically, we could have a couple weeks, summer break, summer vacay between, between the 3rd and the 24th or something like that, or just we'll figure out the year-end transfers timing later. And I'm sure we have the meeting. I apologize. I didn't review the minutes at all. Can we, say again?
Do you want to postpone
Can we do,
discussing them? I read them.
Yeah.
I had one small change.
I reviewed them. I didn't have any changes. They look quite accurate to me.
they always do. I just didn't look at them.
I had said the wrong number when we were having the meeting, of how much the school wanted to reduce its budget by. I said like 1.74 or 1.75, and it's not that. It's like 1.2.
3. Yeah. Yeah, it's closer to 1.3. Yeah, that's why that number, the higher number, was in my head all week, because you said it.
Yes, well.
For real. I've been asking everybody. I thought the number was much higher, because when Carrie says it, it sticks.
I've
Where I heard it, but
I've read them. I don't have any problems. I'll defer to Carrie.
Kathy,
Okay.
does that make sense, just to change that number? Thank you.
So would you like a motion to approve the minutes?
yeah, but I'm not. I can't vote because I haven't looked at them yet.
Okay, then we won't. We can just wait.
I know you've all already read it. Can we just approve this past week's and tonight's next week? We'll get all 100% up to date. Thank you, Catherine, as always, for keeping us so up to date. We did catch up, which is good. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? I know it's been a good action-packed couple hours. All right, then. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Don't we have to approve the minutes first?
No,
We're going to punt it to next week, if that's okay.
Oh, I thought we, sorry.
Yours truly didn't do his homework, so I haven't left the chair all day. I should have looked at it, but I didn't.
Since I didn't hear correctly, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
second.
I second it. Mike, you beat me. All in favor?
Aye. Mike,
Hi,
aye.
David.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Carrie.